Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a very special Marvel movie talk on a special day and a special time. I am Christian Blatt, and it's a homecoming for our pal Caitlin Cornell, who is right here with us. You can see her
I
right
know.
there
I'm
for
finally
our
back,
visual
guys. I
audience.
promise I didn't go away.
And we will explain. Obviously, we don't need an excuse to have Caitlin on and to chat and to honestly, even we on a random Sunday, we could just be like, "Hey, let's talk about the X-Men for an hour." But
Right.
we're also joined by the stars, and Kate, you've mentioned a couple times that you've been working on this, but I
Just
think
a few times.
it's prime time to just mention the simple fact that your short film, your fan film, Uncanny, is now available
Yes.
for people to watch.
Yes.
But we are joined by the stars of Uncanny, Happy Cappy, Alexa Cappiello.
Cappy with her happy Cappy fingers.
And longtime listeners of shows I've done know Alexa and I from shows, but they might not know you, Charlie. So, Charlie, say hello and introduce yourself to the people.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charlie. I play Gambit in the short film. I've been working with Caitlin for a long time, working with Alexa for a really long time. I've been watching Christian for a really long time now, over the past few years. Yeah.
And, yeah, well, thank you. And I'm very excited that we're here and we're able to talk about it. Now, if we're going to talk about the X-Men universe, we'll kind of talk about the way that we've each sort of experienced it and impacted, but it wouldn't be one of my shows if I didn't start off with a comment from Daniel Drew. Daniel Drew says, "Woo! Love the film. Dang, I can't really pick favorite characters or storylines. There's too many." And that's because in the description of the episode, I mentioned that we'll talk about some favorite characters, favorite movies, favorite storylines, all that stuff. And you know what, Daniel? That's probably just what Marvel wants to hear. I like it all. Great. I'll question how much you enjoyed The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine, but of course,
or X-Men 3, X3.
X3 is The Last Stand, and but let's talk happy thoughts and Kate, because this is your brainchild. Yes. Obviously, Alexa and Charlie brought the Vision onto the screen, not Vision from the X-Men from the Avengers, obviously, but talk about you, Kate, and I'll ask the same of Lex and Charlie as we go along. Discovering the X-Men, when you found them, and when you were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing."
Probably when I was I remember hearing the theme song before I remembered any of the show because it would keep replaying. I was about like 2 when it came out, when the X-Men the animated series came out. And I remember every summer my family would always have a like a family reunion in New York, like on this ranch. And I had a lot of my cousins that were my age that were also watching the show, and we would play X-Men in the yard. So I would always play Storm because I liked Storm, and then I got older and I liked Jean because she was more complicated. And they were also the older characters, and I was like the older cousin of everybody, and so we would all like run around the ranch, and we'd all take an X-Men, and I think one of the adults always was a villain, and we would always call them Mr. Sinister, even though they didn't really know who it was. So we would just like attack adults. So I think like we played as kids, like it's a visceral memory of like me. I don't think my brother played, but it was you could all play your own superhero, and you can kind of be your own kind of.
Well, if you didn't want to play X-Men, you could just call dibs on Professor X, and then you could be like, yep, I'm part of the team right now. What about you, Alexa? I know that we've definitely talked about the importance of X-Men, the animated series, but at what point do you discover the show? And look, there's a lot of stuff on TV, but when's the point when you actually notice like, wow, this show's amazing?
Right. So I was a kid and I watched a lot of cartoons like you do as a kid. And yeah, I just remember watching this along with, Batman, the animated series, and all the other cartoons that I would just, engorge myself as a child, because I love cartoons and still do, actually. But when did this series like actually start to affect me is the question.
Yeah, because it's like, look, there, like, I had Three's Company and Different Strokes on every day of my childhood, but I wasn't like blown away by how amazing it was. When
Right.
you're a kid, the TV's on because the TV needs to be on. And
Right.
so then, the channel has to have something on it. But then there's a point where you're like, this
Oh,
thing
wait,
that I'm
this is
watching.
good. The writing's
Yeah.
good. Cool. Yeah. I don't know. I think I started to realize how much I loved X-Men and the Mutants probably when I was at least like 14 or so, like a little earlier on, because I really enjoyed the animated series, but then I started to become obsessed with it around 14 or so, and particularly Rogue and Gambit. I love their romance. I love everything about them. I love how they're just like riffing off of one another, and Rogue's powers always appealed to me. I just thought she was the coolest, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, though.
Sure, yeah.
We're not going to talk about Rogue this episode.
No, not at all. Not at all.
It's a Gambit only zone. But speaking of Gambit,
Gambit.
Charlie, is it a similar story for you, or did was the first time you saw it X-Men Origins Wolverine, and you're like, wow, Channing Tatum was going to do it. The kid from Friday Night Lights.
Oh yeah, Taylor Kitsch.
Yeah,
Cool.
he's the only, as of now, before you, he was the only on-screen Gambit that we got. So
yeah, he's a very good actor. I think he just got not a super great script to play with on that one.
Yeah, because also, we know Ryan Reynolds is good as Deadpool. We know Hugh Jackman is good as Wolverine.
100%.
But boy, that script, I can still smell that script from here.
I watch it every now and again. It's just to see like, there were mistakes made. But yeah, I grew up on X-Men. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, so we only had 3 channels, even in the 90s. So I remember getting up on the roof and rotating the antenna so that we could get channel 27, which was Fox in the area, so that I could watch cartoons in the morning, because it was rotated the other way. You couldn't get 27, but you could get 33. So I remember vividly that was the show to wake up for. It was so energetic. Like on all those cartoons were energetic at the time, but that theme song when it started.
Iconic.
We were at a bar last night playing darts, and that theme song came on.
They sent me a video of them playing darts to the theme song in the background, and it's like, we will not escape. It's like when you I want a red car, and then all you see are red cars on the road. It's like now all we feel are the X-Men universe is like coming.
I definitely need to go to a bar that has that song in the jukebox.
It was in Burbank, so
Oh, okay.
close.
Yeah.
So the next event I have planned, just to interject, another friend checking in from across the pond,
Thank
Craig
you,
Robinson, caught the film earlier. So well made.
We're so
Loved
glad
it.
you liked it.
Yeah. And the X-Men issue that had so there's 2 things from Daniel. First experience is watching the 90s animated series.
Yes.
I don't remember when I started watching.
I forgot
just
what
know
it was called. It was the Fox Kids block.
Yeah, and I mean the show that stands out for me that was a part of that. They also had The Tick, which is a very different superhero show, but also a wonderful and beloved superhero show.
But animated Saturday morning, heyday.
Yeah.
Kids don't get that anymore, unfortunately.
And it's 1992 really is the heyday, because Alexa, you mentioned it. You had X-Men in the animated series. You during the week you also had Batman the animated series, and also somewhat forgotten but also great was the Superman animated series. So you had these great shows that were all on, and then Spider-Man a couple years later, also on Fox. So and really before that they weren't great. As people in the chat and sometimes co-panelists are quick to point out, I'm older than all of you, and the superhero cartoons that I grew up with were not that good. The Super Friends was really my entryway into superhero characters at all, and then that's basically the Justice League, but as watered down as you can make them. and as unappealing as they could be.
Yeah.
But I also loved Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. And there are 2 episodes with the X-Men of that show.
Mhm.
And you can watch Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends on Disney Plus now. And I watched some of it with my kids, and my daughter was terrified of Doctor Doom. And I'm like, well, you should be. He's scary. But
Except when he's a good guy, then he's fine.
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But so by the time that this series started airing, I'd been reading X-Men comics for probably like 8 or 9 years. And so I was really invested in these characters. I had my favorites. And I think that they really were able to capture the spirit of why we cared about them, And I think that, the team that you got from that show was really just because that's who the main X-Men were at that time. A few years earlier, they did a pilot called Pride of the X-Men, which is really well animated. Wasn't quite the right tone, but it starred my favorite X-Men, Kitty Pryde. But by the time they did this show, Jubilee was front and center. And, so that's kind of the focus there. But you were always going to build it around Wolverine. And, Rogue is a very interesting character because
they actually built it around Gambit, because Gambit was the latest character and they wanted to push his toys. So they had to put Rogue in, and then the triad of Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Wolverine. So that was like the beginnings of the team, was because they needed Gambit in there. So Gambit is vital to X-Men animated series. Yeah.
Gotta get them toys sold.
Got to get the toys.
Right, exactly. And of course you had to sell the toys. And, so Rogue is this character that's introduced as a villain. And for quite some time she was. It's interesting because she's a little bit of an older character when they first introduce her. She fought with Dazzler a few times, but her first appearance is in Avengers Annual number 10. Yeah. And there's a flashback in there about how she stole Carol Danvers' powers, who had been Ms. Marvel before that. So before that, Rogue doesn't fly. She doesn't have the super strength, but then she makes contact with Carol for too long. And then it's stuck inside of her. Carol doesn't have powers anymore, but Carol just exists as a human for a while. So it's a very interesting sort of, this conflict. And they wisely aged her down a little bit. And I had mentioned to Caitlin that I have some show and tell that I've dug out from the garage. So I could not find my X-Men Annual 10, but I do have Uncanny X-Men 171 here, which is Welcome to the X-Men Rogue. Hope you survived the experience. This is when she joins the team, and everybody is familiar with her as a villain. So they're not entirely, it's not entirely a warm reception.
Oh yeah.
And
her.
And but at a certain point, within a few issues, Wolverine's off. I'll show you why he's off. This is the issue after that. He's off getting married. Yeah, getting married to Mariko. But and then he's like, so wait, she's on the team now? And then the fact that everybody else vouches for her, he's like, all right, I guess.
Well, not entirely. I mean, it almost tears apart the team, and it's because Rogue saves his wife that he finally turns the leaf a little.
Yeah, once she gets Wolverine's stamp of approval, I think she's like solidified completely the team.
Which also shows how important Wolverine is to the team. That everyone else could do it, but until Wolverine gives the stamp, it's like, okay, now she cool.
Right, exactly.
Xavier wasn't enough, and Cyclops wasn't enough, or Storm wasn't enough, because Storm and Rogue have a really interesting relationship too.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just some amazing storytelling that happens in the mid-'80s when Storm loses her powers, and the reason she loses her powers is it was a shot that was intended for Rogue, because they consider Rogue to be a threat. Even though she's on the X-Men at that point, but they also kind of consider all the X-Men to be a threat. So there's a long stretch where Storm doesn't have any powers, and she's still able to one-up Cyclops to lead the X-Men. So there's always that. So that's how badass Storm is. So so when the animated series comes along, it's just like, oh yeah, they understand what it is. And I know that over the course of Comic-Con, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you were able to chat with a few people associated with the animated series, and I've done a few interviews with Eric and Julia Lewald, who were behind the scenes on that. They also put out a couple of books about the animated series, including the previously on X-Men, which Alexa's wearing a hat for right now. Oh, and Caitlin's got one too. Charlie, they didn't get you a hat?
No, mine's in the other room.
Okay.
I felt two people wearing the hat would be a little much.
Too many people wearing the same hat.
But the book's right here as well.
Yeah. And look, I think without the tremendous success of that series, you don't get the X-Men movies. In 2000, the first one comes out. And I think there's a lot of things about that first one that are good, but you can see a studio that is like, we are not giving you the kind of money you need for this. The example I always use.
That's better.
Well, the example I always use is that the big culmination, the big fight scene happens in the gift shop of the Statue of Liberty, not on the Statue of Liberty, not in front of the Statue of Liberty, not in the water by Ellis Island. No, it's in the gift shop. So it's very, so it's just like, oh man, if they just kicked a couple of $1 million extra, think about how crazy that would look. So that's why my favorite of all the X-Men movies is the second one, because they actually spent money on it. Storytelling is great in that. And that's, we get Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler, who's one of my favorite characters. And of course, we also get Hank McCoy. And, you don't necessarily think Kelsey Grammer as a superhero, but his voice was perfect, and the voice for Beast on the animated series was great. So as time goes on and the movies start to come out.
Did you hear what Kelsey Grammer said recently?
No.
If Marvel doesn't bring him back as Beast, he's just boycotting the whole thing. I mean, I agree. I agree. There's no reason to recast him, just to have him in there again.
Yeah, no, I mean, when they did like First Class and they needed a younger Beast, they had Nicholas Hoult, obviously. Sure. But and look, just use his voice. It's all right. Have a CGI Beast. It's okay. I mean, his voice was perfect for it. I definitely agree with that. But let me ask each of you, this is sort of an inclusion for people that are in the live chat, but if you're also watching this after the fact, leave comments and let us know. What do you think was, for you personally, I'll ask you first, Caitlin, the best representation on screen, obviously before your film, but where it was like, they really nailed it. I mean, I always say that there have been 3 on-screen adaptations of the Dark Phoenix saga, which is, one of the greatest storylines in comic books of all time. The only one that was really well done was the animated series. Neither movie was particularly good, so it could be the animated series, but do you feel that one of the films did a really good job, whether it be Logan, sort of Logan.
I mean, for me, the top 3, and Charlie and Alexa and I have watched a lot. And what was interesting was when we were watching the X-Men live series, and we can talk about that when we talk about the music, but the music is mostly secondary. I think Alexa made a comment of like the music of the films you wish they were more like, catchy. And they're meant to be that way, I think, because in X2, the story is so complex. I think X2 understood what the X-Men were as a team and how they were built, because every single character has a moment of growth, or a moment of change. I like with God, who's that kid? Pyro, even though he joins the dark side, he does grow, he does change. And then you have all of these weird, random, unlikely pairings that cause that change. And I think that's the kind of strength of the X-Men. And I really enjoyed, I don't like the movie as a whole, but I think Charlie and I were talking about, there's a scene in one of the newer ones. I want to say Age of Apocalypse, but it's not that. It's the one where he takes the neck, where Michael Fassbender takes the necklace, and reams through all of the soldiers, and I think
that
that's
is
one of
that
the
is
more
in the
powerful.
that's the beginning of Age of Apocalypse.
Age
I
of
think.
Apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's one of
Yeah.
the more powerful X-Men moments, I think, that
Wow.
really stuck out to me in terms of not just his character, but the pain that we go through and the pain that those characters carry with them all the time, of being different, and how easy it is to use your power to manifest, something sinister. But I think that those two, that moment and X2 were really powerful to me. So
Yeah.
those are my favorites.
X2 is somewhat based on what I think is standalone is the best indication of an X-Men story. Marvel graphic novel number 5, God Loves Man Kills, because it is a self-contained story, is a very adult story. There's actual swearing in it, and it's a lot more violent than comics were at that time. Yeah. So and it's also just beautifully well done. But yeah,
that
and
was
I
when
think
it seemed like they were really stepping into like, yeah, this is what we're talking about. They're a little bit more ham-fisted with the theme
yeah.
that X-Men gets at in that comic in particular, I thought.
Yeah. Well, so same question for you, Charlie. What do you think is, sort of, to me, that's the best printed representation of the X-Men, but what do you think on screen? If it's, a couple of episodes, if it's a film, what do you think has done the best job capturing it?
I think to me, Caitlin kind of stole mine a little bit, because that moment, I think, is one of the most visceral moments of like the X-Men series. It makes you feel so much like you would want to do the same thing, I think. In that moment, I think they handled Magneto so well throughout all of them. He's one of the most well-handled characters, I think. They allow him, especially in the latter movies, they allow him to I love when you see what is typically the bad guy, even though it could be argued that he's not necessarily the bad guy, but like the motivations for doing horrible things. And I think they handled that really well with his character in particular throughout all of it. But I can watch any of those movies at any time. You put on X1, 2, 3, First Class, all of them, even the Phoenix stuff. I love them. I think they're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because they're different interpretations. As you go through the years, you see all the different comic interpretations, the different like head writer interpretations. And I think that's we're in a cool place now where all of those different interpretations can be built on and diverted from, and the character depth, I think, is really what we get the most out of with that, rather than just the individual storyline.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they all certainly have moments that work really well. Specifically, Dark Phoenix has the only sequence where I feel like they really capture Nightcrawler. It's where he's on the train and he's teleporting and he's just, beating the hell out of these guys. And it's like, yeah, that's what he does. And you don't see that in X2. There's not enough of them in the animated series. No. So I think even the ones that I don't like, except for really X-Men Origins Wolverine. Although I guess, what I'll say about that is Liev Schreiber is amazing as Sabretooth. The film is not good, but he's so good as Sabretooth.
Yes,
so good.
Absolutely. Because the original, I don't know who played the original one. He looks like the guy from the cartoons. He's the big hulking, the teeth and all that. But like the recast of Schreiber was brilliant. To see those two go head to head is fantastic.
What about you, Happy Cappy? Do you feel that in terms of what basically epitomizes the X-Men for you on the screen?
I mean, anything Hugh Jackman did in those movies. He's so good. He's too tall. He's too tall for Wolverine, and too handsome, in my opinion.
Well,
But
let me just interject because I've talked to longtime X-Men writer Chris Claremont, who's responsible for pretty much all the stories we're talking about. He wrote the comic book versions of pretty much all of them. And he said that in the late 80s, he wanted Wolverine to be played by Bob Hoskins, who people will know as from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Now, he's not particularly strong. He's the right height. He's the right look. Everything about him. He's like, that's who I wanted.
He's super gruff.
Yeah, and you think about it for a second, and you're like, I mean, that's the Wolverine in the comics.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's hard to imagine not having Hugh Jackman. So
I know.
it's like
I think if we do cast, if they do cast somebody like shorter and a little scruffier, I think we're gonna see a bit of what's going on with Wednesday, the Netflix series with Gomez,
Yes.
where people are like, this isn't accurate, and actually. It
is accurate.
More accurate this way than it was. But anyway, Hugh Jackman is an incredible Wolverine. That's just, we can't argue that. Anything he was in, particularly the reason why I love X-Men so much is because it is a soap opera with superheroes. So of course, I'm the girl here that's like, oh my god, I love that he loves Jean Grey, and she actually kind of loves him too a little bit. But then, of course, it's tied to Cyclops. So anything that had to do with that love triangle and all that, I just ate up. I enjoyed it so much. I mean, we got to mention Nightcrawler in particular. The first scene where he's infiltrating the White House to give a message to the president. That's just all of that whole scene, and just seeing the depth in which like Nightcrawler's powers are just so kick-ass. Like we had not seen him bamf so often before, and in such cool ways. And the fact that we were able to see that they brought that to screen, I just remember being in my chair and screaming because I loved it so much. What else? I mean, anything with Magneto, Ian McKellen as Magneto, in my opinion, was perfect casting. Patrick Stewart as Professor X, perfect casting. Even James Marsden as Cyclops. I personally don't enjoy Cyclops so much as a character, but he nailed it, in my opinion. And Famke Jensen as Jean Grey. She is the epitome of Jean Grey to me.
Rebecca Romijn as Rebecca Romijn as fucking.
Rebecca Romijn as Mystique as well. It was weird, the fact that Mystique and Nightcrawler had a scene together, and there was no mention of the fact that she's his mother. No mention whatsoever.
And that's the problem, because different creators a long time have felt differently about what their relationship is. I mean, there is what they've established, and I think in the movies they didn't know what to do with it. A couple of points. The first is to again reference talking about X-Men movies with Chris Claremont. He was talking about when he saw the first one, when he saw X-Men the 2001. There's the moment when Wolverine and Rogue are in the car, and she sees that he sticks out his claw, and she's like, does it hurt? And he says, every time. And he's like, yes, that's what people don't get, is that, he has that healing factor, but it still hurts every time he uses his claws. And it's like, you just understand who he is, and obviously what he is. And I think that that's important. And, to Alexa's point, they cast Professor X and Magneto so well both times. Both versions of them are so great. Like, James McAvoy as so much other stuff I'd seen him before that, but I'm like, he's a great young Charles Xavier. And you're like, oh man, what a head of hair he had. What a shame. But
I also think we'd be a little remiss if we don't bring up, especially since Marvel is doing it now with their, Werewolf by Night, and like genre bending their own stuff. But the first to really kind of genre bend was New Mutants as a horror film.
Yeah.
And even though it might not have been received or marketed or, whatever the faults of that movie were, it was a different take on a superhero movie. So I appreciate the kind of they broke through the door of making it not just, superhero movies don't have to be just action movies. which is the door that I walked through.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's a great point. I think the intention behind New Mutants is good. I always liked those characters. I was excited for that movie. Had to go see it in the drive-in because there were no movie theaters that you could actually go see it in when it came out. And there's things that I liked about it, and it was mostly like, oh, I'm glad I got to see that character on the screen. I think Anna Taylor-Joy as Magic was great, and the actress who played Mirage I thought was good. It's just, again, when the script's not there, it kind of doesn't matter who's in your movie. So you always kind of wonder, like, oh, if they'd gotten that right, if Fox hadn't been bought by Disney, who knows what would have been next. But it's but there is a bit of a lull in the X-Men film universe, so seemed like a great time to have a new entry, a fan film. And at what moment did you think, Kate, that did it go from like, oh, that might be kind of fun, to like, no, let's actually do this? Talk about like just the genesis of, I want to make this film. And we're talking about your film Uncanny, which I know it's Uncanny Film on Instagram. Before you start talking about it, make sure you tell everybody all the places they can find it.
Oh, yeah. And I'll talk about it at the end, but you can find Uncanny at Uncanny Film on Instagram, and Uncanny X Universe Fan Film on Facebook. There it is. Yeah, and that poster actually has the cast members in it. So Alexa is on top, and that really is Charlie on the bottom. You can carry them in your pocket wherever you go. The genesis of this was, during pandemic, Charlie, Alexa, and I were in a pod together. And Alexa, I think we got on a track of, I don't remember how the X-Men came up, but I think we were watching a lot of movies and TV shows from our childhood because we needed a lot of like nostalgia points. I think we watched E.T. because I had never seen it. I think we had watched like a couple other things. Like we had watched what do we watch? Hunchback, because Charlie had never seen it. Like we watched a lot of kind of childhood was coming up as a constant, as a reoccurring topic. And Alexa brought up, wanting to play Rogue one day, but not knowing if she'd ever get the opportunity. And I wanted to write superhero movies. I wanted to make superhero movies. Charlie wanted to make superhero movies, and they call each other like Sugar and Cher in the house, and like now we're all roommates, and it's Sugar and Cher, and it's a very cute. And so I kind of stopped. I kind of was like, oh, that would be a good idea, and then I kind of stopped there. And then in July, after I had a very slow week at work one week, and then I was just like, what if I just like wrote a quick thing and like just see how it came out? And so I wrote the first draft of the script after kind of ruminating on what the story could be for about a year, because Alexa, we would bring it up every once in a while. And it's like, oh, well, we could do this movie, or we could do this story, or, this was what's cool about Rogue. And it kind of just sits there and it like stews in the pot. And, things get, when you let things stew, it just gets better. And then I wrote it in about an afternoon, and I printed it and I handed it to Alexa. I think in like late July. And I just said, you want to do it? Like I wrote something, do you want to do it? And then we just did.
Yeah,
well, let's talk.
Let it be known
go ahead,
that
Alexa.
This is not my idea. Like,
so
anybody
you didn't grab her by the collar and say, write me a Rogue movie.
And I didn't mean for it to come off that way. I just, it was the talking about it and having an inspiration and having someone who I knew wanted to play these parts makes it intensely easier to let you write for someone who is, you write for people who want to play. And it just becomes much more fun to like write what you want to play, and to know that we had been talking about these characters in superhero movies and movie making, and we have a similar. I think we all three of us saw a similar gap, and I wanted to fill that gap, and I knew that these two lovely humans would want to come with me on this journey, and I wouldn't really have to sell them hard on it, so that makes it easier. So, but I knew it was important that I didn't just tell Alexa I wrote a script. I had to print it and hand it to her so that she knew that it was a real thing and it wasn't just like in her inbox somewhere.
Yeah.
No,
Oh yeah, no, I've got a
anyone-
script somewhere. I'm
anyone
not ready to
who
show it
knows
to you.
me knows how obsessed I've been with Rogue since I was a kid. So
Yeah.
I started at it was I think the pandemic where I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to cosplay as her. I'm just gonna.
It was the cosplay because he bought the cosplay.
Yeah, so like I finally was like, you know what? This has been a dream of mine to cosplay as her for a while. I'm just gonna go and do it. So I did it, and it was so fun. Of course, I went to a few cons as her, but yeah, I mean, you've seen our room. I mean, even behind us, we have a bunch of Rogue and Gambit and Avengers comics.
It's a shrine. You can call it a shrine.
It's a Marvel in our living room right now, and we all love it so much. We've grown up with this stuff. But in particular, what was hilarious about this whole fan film journey is that truly I was not expecting anything. She just literally was like, you want to do a Rogue and Gambit short? And I was like, yeah, that sounds fun. Like they've never done Rogue and Gambit right in live action. And they are one of the, if not the best couple, I mean, in my opinion, I'm a little biased, in comics, in Marvel comics. And they're just so fun and there's so much to mine there. So I was like, yeah, we don't have this yet in fandom. I don't know why or how, but we don't have it yet. So that would be great if we could fill that void somehow. And then next thing I know, but that's the thing. I was like, yeah, sure, yeah, she's gonna write a movie. Okay.
Yeah.
Because Caitlin, if you know Caitlin at all, she has a million projects that she's constantly doing all the time. She's always working on a project or 10,000 projects at once. So I was skeptical. I didn't think that it was actually going to happen. And then the moment when she walks in and just put it on my lap, there was an Uncanny written by, Caitlin Cornell. And I was just like, oh, I guess we're doing this.
She did.
And Charlie's like, I guess we're doing this. And, so
2 months later, we were on set.
She's
1 month later, we were on set.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk for a moment about the inspiration for the actual writing and the sort of the time frame, because that ties into some more of my show and tell, which is the Rogue miniseries, which you will see. My entire series is signed by artist Mike Wieringo from some, and I forgot they were signed until I got them this afternoon. I dug them out and I made sure that. My boxes of various X-Men miniseries were all close by, and I was able to kind of revisit it. I haven't read this in forever, but
really, you should read it and then watch the movie.
I know that's what I was going to do, but then I was like, but I can also read the movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I watched the movie quicker than, although it's not going to take that long to read it. So, Caitlin, talk a little bit about this series sort of being the entry point from the storytelling, and then I do want to circle back to you, Charlie. I just wanted to one, show off comics, and then two, kind of talk about that aspect of the actual screenwriting.
So what's interesting about attacking X-Men is that you can take their story from anywhere because it's so long. When there was almost a part of me that wanted to pursue it from a point where they didn't have powers, where they both had their powers taken away and they could actually touch each other. But I felt like that would be not as fun. So what I did was I did a lot of research. The Marvel Unlimited is a really good resource for people who are into the comics. It is a subscription service. And also the LA Library is a really good resource. They have a lot of comics for free on there. So it was a lot of research. Again, slow week at work. And what it would take, and I was really attached to the story of Rogue from the aspect of what would it take for her to build a family and then want to protect it by doing what she does, which is leaving. And what the first part of Rogue's story that struck me was Rogue is not her X-Men name. It is her name from her childhood, because she keeps going rogue. She keeps running away from her after her mom disappears, and after her stepmother goes, her aunt goes, like, starts to take care of her, and gets a little controlling, and she starts leaving situations because that's easier. And I felt a similar way in my life. Like, I've definitely identified with that, and I think that I based it off of this 4-part series as a continuation of the Howard Mackie 4-part Rogue from 1995, because it was, just out of X-Men. The animated series had just ended. So I think the comics were, trying to, here's one last Rogue story, or one Rogue story. But also I think it was important for Rogue. It was a pivotal point in Rogue and Gambit's relationship of the beginning of in this comic in particular. It was, it starts with her and Gambit in a restaurant, and Gambit is trying to understand, like, why can't we go any further? Like, what is the emotional holdup? And they're having a very intense, adult, mature, emotional conversation. And she's honest with him of, there's this other person and I still have guilt over it, and I need to go visit him. And I visit him every year. He offers to go with her. She says no. And then this whole, both of their pasts come back. Belladonna as his ex-wife, and Cody as her, childhood sweetheart. And so it was a nice kind of, like, this was an emotional story for both of them that was pivotal in, are we going to come together or are we going to break apart? So that question is never answered in the comic, because it ends with, spoiler alert, Cody not surviving. Thank you, Kendra. And I wanted to have a conversation about vulnerability in relationships and vulnerability. I wanted to finish it. I wanted to finish that conversation that they had started in the first issue. And I felt like it was in the comic continuation, they go off and they do other things and they don't come back together for a while. I think this is actually right after this is when she has her little, like, for lack of a better term, relationship with Magneto, the Silver Fox Magneto.
I
don't remember.
I believe that was actually a little bit before that, and
it was a little bit before.
A lot of times
Magneto.
You enter through some kind of magical, what it was called, the Siege Perilous. You don't know who you are anymore. Everybody's different people. And look, you see Magneto wandering around the Savage Land with his shirt off. It's hard to really, like, ask about, what he had done before. Like, you don't ask him about sinking a submarine of Russian soldiers. No. You're just like, oh, hey. And he figures out a way where Magneto figures out a way where they can actually touch. And I do mean touch. So, it's, so the timeline is interesting because, they were obviously working on reinventing the character. Now, Charlie, you get the opportunity to play Gambit, and don't worry, I have show and tell for you as well, even though this doesn't enter into this story for the film, but also signed, by the way. Apparently I got all my X-Men miniseries signed in, like,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, you had talked about how that was a character that you responded to from even a young age, just seeing him on the show. Mm-hmm. So this is going on around you. Caitlin's written this script. Alexa's like, yeah, I bullied my friend into writing me a Rogue movie. And you get the benefit of, like, oh, I get to be in it too. So talk about sort of, watching all of this unfold. And if you were similarly like, oh, wow, it's actually been written. Like, this is starting to become real.
Yeah, I mean, Caitlin always surprises with how quickly she can take and break a story. We've worked together since through the pandemic and a little bit before that.
Because you helped me do one of my first short films I ever did for a NASA thing. You were incredibly helpful.
You showed
up. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, hi.
Oh, hi.
But we did a short film that's on the festival circuit right now, called Hindsight. She helped in creating, writing, producing on that, and another one that we made. It didn't really surprise me that she came back with it. The surprise, I think, with this one has come from just the the willpower and execution. A lot of people write stuff, a lot of people get stuff together, a lot of people get it, you know, but to like bring people together and make something like this happen, that's the part that a lot of people don't get to in this industry. It's really hard. This stuff is difficult to make, even on a small scale like this. You know, you still need 20 people to make this thing happen. You need lights and cameras and all the things that, you know, happen behind the scenes. And I think that, you know, me, I'm a filmmaker as well. I'm an actor. I do all the things, but like, it's lovely to see a lot of people, especially on this set, who were super stoked to be there because it was X-Men, because it was, you know, all these people who jumped on board because this was such a pivotal show for them in their childhood. Our generation, literally, this was like a staple cartoon that led to all sorts of other cartoons for us. So it was really cool just, you know, getting a chance to play Gambit. He's the coolest of all the mutants. He's the coolest guy in probably comics. He's just cool. So I got to mess around with being cool, and I'm, you know, it can be argued. But
look, you look, there's being cool, and then there's Remy LeBeau cool.
There's Remy LeBeau. He's just cool.
Yeah.
So having a chance to play at that, you know, I think defining cool is just, you know, a person who doesn't really have to care all that much about what's going on. It's like everything's going to work out, and it's laid back and chill. That was how I treated this whole character. That was how I treated the whole thing. They were kind of annoyed with me.
I was annoyed with him. I'm like,
I wasn't doing nearly as much
lines.
Research and line running and stuff. And I was just like, I got it.
Honestly, I was just like, you guys handle it.
Here I was like, you know, writing detailed bios and just like researching everything, making sure I knew every single detail about, you know, Rogue and Anne-Marie and her relationship with Gambit and her whole history on the team. He's just like, I got it.
I got it.
This is such a relationship piece too.
Yeah.
It's a rom-com. It's got some funny. She's dealing with some really heavy stuff, and the approach to it was literally just, let's deal with her. She's going to be Rogue. That's cool. I'll work on my Cajun accent. I'm from the South, so I'm close. And let's play, and let's just, you know, help lift up this character of Rogue, because Gambit is an important character in this, but this is Rogue's story. This is a story about somebody who's really, really dealing with guilt and trauma, and you know, that's been a major theme for us over the course of pandemic. Everybody went through a collective trauma all at once, and us learning how to manage our own trauma through other people who have managed their trauma. You know, the sayings of, you know, a hurt person hurts people, and then a healed person heals people. I think that we got to see a little bit of somebody like Remy in this story in particular, who he's been through some shit and he's learned how to manage it. He's learned how to deal with it in certain ways, and you know, understand himself, which allows him to understand what Rogue's going through. You know, that parable of, you know, why did you jump down in this hole with me? Well, I've been here before.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very complicated character, and you know, when he was first introduced for those early years, there was a lot of question about something specific that he knew he'd done, but you know, and it comes to light that he basically helped Mr. Sinister and the Marauders with the Morlock massacre by being like, yeah, this is the back way in. You know, I'll leave the door open for you. And it's like, oh my God, that's such a horrible thing. And, you know, like, I think a lot of people do horrible things in comic books and need to figure out a way to try to make up for it. But it makes him, you know, that much more of a complicated character. And by the way, Daniel Drew in the chat, the lesson here is be careful what you talk about with Kate, because she might come at you with a full script soon after.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about the production of actually going and doing it. So just give us sort of an explanation, Kate, for how long it was and what it entailed, and then I'll ask Alexa and Charlie about
how
the time
traumatizing
on
it was.
set.
Yeah. So I gave him the script on July 27th. And then about a week later, a friend of mine, who also was the lighting designer and the gaffer, my friend Zach from college, he had a house in Lake Arrowhead. And we got very, very lucky because he called me. It almost felt like kismet. Like it was all coming together the way it was supposed to. Because he texted me a picture from his porch And the way that his house is designed is the porch is load bearing. So the fact that he was on the porch meant that the porch had been fixed, which meant the house was open for visitors. So I called him and I went, funny story. I wrote a house that needs a cabin. I wrote a short film that needs a cabin. And he's like, oh, okay. How many people? So then became the idea of getting a minimal crew up there. And you know, I think we had a few bedrooms available, but most of us were going to be like couching it or, you know, putting, you know, air mattresses down. And then I got my DP named Dana Saint Amand, who was also a Steadicam operator. And she also comes from the grip and gaffing world, so she knows how to light. So I asked her if she wanted to work on an X-Men fan film with me, and she said sure, but I'm completely booked for all of September. And I had a feeling like I was about to start a job in September. So I have a feeling if I didn't do it soon, that it would just like sit and it would never happen. And I was determined. So I looked at my cast and I was like, are you okay to shoot at the end of August?
Yeah.
And so it was once I had the location set and once I had the DP set, it was getting sound, it was getting, you know, lights and renting equipment, which I'd done before for other people, but I'd never done for me. So it was, you have to set the vision ahead of time. You have to, you know, I did overheads and planned everything out. I'm very open about my process and about the process that we all went on. A lot of it is on Uncanny Film, which is the Instagram account. So you can, you know, if you're curious about any details of the process, what it's like to make a paper edit, what it's like to, you know, make overheads and plan out, you know, scenes and shots and stuff. It's all up there. And then to bump off of Charlie's point, I had a first AD come out for one day and sleep on the couch because I was like, I don't have room for you. And he's like, it's the X-Men. I'm going to come. Like, I want to go play. So he drove up in the middle of the night, worked for one day, and then left on Sunday. So we all drove up on a Friday afternoon. We had a blocking rehearsal in the space after doing, you know, a month of, you know, prep and, you know, a couple cast rehearsals. We had a stunt rehearsal with a stunt coordinator for the fight scene. But it was nice to have, I think that was one of my favorite moments, was having just Charlie and Alexa and me in the space without anybody there and just walking through everything and getting ourselves comfortable before we showed what the weekend was. And then we shot half of it Saturday and half of it Sunday and left Sunday night. So we filmed it in about 2 days.
Right. And I wanted to ask Alexa and Charlie, you know, I mean, it's it's an intense process in the sense that it's a confined space, and it really is just the two of you for the whole movie, you know. So it's like, you know, you have each other to work off of, but it's not like a nice ensemble piece where, oh yeah, but the pizza guy came in the middle, gave everybody a break. It's just the two of you working through this. So let me ask you first, Alexa, talk about sort of just working through that from a performance standpoint and just sort of your interpretation of what was going on the page and, you know, trying to make sure you brought it to the screen.
Yeah, so it was pretty daunting, you know, when you love a character as much as I do, and then all of a sudden you're playing the character. Even in a fan film, it's just, I wanted to do her justice. I wanted to just, you know, make sure I did her right and well. So I spent a lot of time researching. Of course, we watched the entire X-Men animated series again, and spent a lot of time online, going through all sorts of you know, details about her past and what I wanted to lift from the comics versus the X-Men animated series. And I mean, I just wrote out this whole, like, if I don't have my script here with me, but if you saw it, it looks like just a war zone of notes just everywhere on the script. But you know, I all that backstory and stuff aside, I really wanted to focus on a person not knowing how to deal with their trauma and their guilt and what that felt like, what that looked like. So I was doing a lot of inner work too on how I've kind of worked my way through similar situations to her. And, you know, it's interesting because I've definitely been in relationships that I didn't want to start because I wasn't ready to, because of many things. So like I totally understood where she was coming from and the fear behind it all. And yeah, we did a lot of work. For me, Rogue is a very physical character. Obviously, she's the brawler of the team. She's kind of the tank. She's always up, and up in front, taking all the hits because she can. And she's so I wanted to physically embody her really well and work with Talia, our stunt woman. She was really amazing. She helped me because I kind of had 2 left feet here and there, just look like I'm a huge fighter because I do box, but this is a different kind of style of fighting that Rogue does. And, there are elements of boxing, but she's very much in her body and she's very comfortable in her body, which is ironic considering she can't touch anybody. That is her plight, of course. So yeah, I worked with Talia, I worked with Caitlin, but there was nothing like getting in the space and then having the costume on top of the hair, which we had amazing hair and makeup artists come in and do my hair for free. Thank you, Renee. Yeah, that was real. Those streaks were real. Still suffering the damage of it, but it's okay. I had to do it. I could not put fake white streaks in my hair.
It wouldn't have looked good, It's yeah.
So I felt like there was no other option. I needed to do it, and I'm very thankful.
Agreed.
Renee for coming in and doing that for us. But yeah, there was nothing like stepping in the space after having gone through the whole choreography in our tiny little cramped apartment when we finally were in the space and we were doing it. And he's all dressed up like Gambit and he has the eyes, and at first I was so thrown aback like he's a cute little guy, and then all of a sudden he looks like a demon. But I think it worked really well. I was also wearing contacts. I know you can't really tell, but I definitely put in some green contacts too, because I'm not going to give the fans any reason other than, their own personal preference to dislike me. I know Rogue has green eyes. I must also have green eyes.
Yeah. Well, at least you were telling a story where she has the long hair and she's presented as more feminine. It could have been this era where you would have had to, really like do the buzz cut, and then also get the white streak in there as well. So.
Next one, I'll buzz my head for it.
Nice. So Charlie, you get to set, and obviously job 1 is all right, time to be cool. But beyond that, what are some of the things that go into it for you?
I mean, for me, the biggest thing was the eyes. It's what they keep messing up with Gambit. I've seen a lot of even fan films and stuff. There have been a couple of them out there, and there have been some good ones. The action one on YouTube is a whole lot of fun. They spent a good amount of money to make some really cool stuff happen in that one. But the eyes, man, that's the most important. Gambit had to have the bright red, black eyes. That was an important character trait that I think that they missed out on, and that they have missed out on. Even talking with X-Men the Animated Series folks at Comic-Con, I was wearing the eyes there when we were walking around, and that is important. Everybody keeps missing that.
There's
us. Yeah. Caitlin took the photo, but that means she's not in it.
That's fine.
Next time I need a 90s Gambit. This was the wardrobe for the film, so it was a little bit skewed. But yeah, the eyes were super important, and then just being there for the character as Gambit was there for Rogue, to be as supportive as possible for what we were trying to get, and to have fun with it, to let this stuff be the fun that it is. Like you were talking a little earlier about the idea of why Sir Patrick Stewart and Sir Ian McKellen and the casting for these characters has been so great, and I think it's because these people do Shakespeare.
Yep.
Yeah. And this is Shakespeare.
Yep.
It is just is. It's silly to say that, and it seems silly to talk about superheroes in that way. But if you know how to deliver Shakespeare well, you can deliver this kind of stuff well, because you're saying ridiculous shit. Yep. You're saying some things that are just cheesy if you say them cheesy. So having that kind of gravitas that those guys had to embody those characters, I think was why it worked so well. So that was another part of it for this, was just to really know the words, to really know what was going on, and to be there present with her, which isn't hard. I mean, we spend a whole lot of time together anyways. But in these circumstances, in these heightened situations, as characters who can punch somebody across the room and zap her with my powers, it was mostly just being there and being allowed to be there, which I think is a whole lot of fun. And Caitlin created a space for us to be able to do that.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Well, thank you.
Thanks
for playing.
Once again, Daniel Drew, heaping the compliments. I
Oh,
certainly
thank you.
loved y'all's characterization of both characters in the film.
Aw.
And here's the thing about putting something out on the internet. If people didn't like your characterization, they'd be very quick to let you know.
Yes,
So-
that is true.
and I know that the film when I watched it, the film had already been watched a few thousand times, and I saw the Instagram account posted some of the nice compliments that people left. And look, I think somebody who's going to take the time to click on the link and watch this, it's because they're excited about it and they want to like it, and I think that's a great place to start from when
Yeah.
you're watching anything. Look, tomorrow night I'm going to a press screening of Avatar. It's 3 hours and 12 minutes. You know
Wow.
what? I want to like it because I'm going to be sitting in a chair for I'm going to be sitting in the chair for 3.5
Yeah.
hours. So I don't want to not like it. I don't understand how people don't want to like things. I want to like everything I sit down for.
Yeah.
You know? And sometimes things surprise you. Violent Night was an awful lot of fun.
Really?
David Harbour as
Yeah,
Santa
I'm hearing good
Claus.
things.
Yeah. It's you know what? It's a lot of it's what you think it is, but then there's a little bit of heart in there where you're like, oh man, this Violent Santa Claus movie is making me get a little misty. So, and I like being surprised. I like when things, deliver on what I want from them. And this is exactly what I wanted from a short film about Gambit and Rogue. I love watching the two of them together. And you're right. We have really been deprived of this. The animated series did a good job giving us some of it.
Amazing.
I think it's Rogue and Jean in the Christmas episode of the animated series where he like throws her out of the kitchen because he's the man. Like, come on, he's Cajun.
He knows how to
From the
cook.
South.
Let him cook.
We
Jean's from the suburbs of Chicago. She doesn't know how to cook. Okay, let's just be honest.
Yep.
Yeah.
She could tell you where to get a good deep dish pizza or an Italian beef, but I don't think she
I
can
do want to
cook.
mention
She
that
wants some
some of the inspo for us, like building these characters, was watching a lot of cooking on YouTube, particularly like Cajun cooking from like authentic Cajun people, and then Mississippi cooking, because we were trying to get these dialects like nailed in our heads, and we wanted to do them right. And what better way to do that than to listen to the cooking of the characters or the people from
Those areas.
Mississippi and Louisiana. So we learned a lot. And then, of course, Gambit's a way better cook than Rogue is, and that's how I think
Which is mentioned in the movie.
Yes. That's how he shows love and admiration to people, and like that's just part of their culture down there is
Yes, it
cooking.
is.
So deep. We wanted to make sure that we had that in there too. And then the music. I think we should also mention the music. We wanted to make sure that the music was authentic to them, who they were, and so we had a little. Caitlin and I sat down and we talked about what kind of music would play throughout, and the inspo behind it, and it was a lot of fun. So
there was a playlist that we played on during breakfast because I made breakfast for everybody every day. And it was Alexa's playlist that she built for her character, which was a lot of Texas blues and Coco Taylor and Big Mama Thornton, and we got very, very lucky. There were two composers on the show. There was my friend Tom McManally, who did all of the Texas blues guitar, and he did it live play to the film. We played the movie. I gave him I was like, can you do like a mix between Coco Taylor with like a little bit of like ZZ Top's thrown in there, and he's like, "Sure, of course I can,"
Yeah.
and that's what happened. And so the I think the most fun was doing that kind of live play as if there was a live track going and he was riffing during their fight scene, so it sort of lined up, but it didn't really line up.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. And then our composer, Dwayne, did all of the cinematic orchestrations. So the entire, like, the reconciliation scene with their big kind of dialogue scene, where we actually fit in a very familiar theme melody line in there. It is in there. It's about like the 5-minute 45-second mark, if anyone's counting. But the music was really, really important. And we spent a lot of time on it, and wanting to make sure that it had that effect of accentuating how cool these characters are and how dangerous they are. Like, the music of Texas Blues is almost, it can be unpredictable because it's so energized, and both of these characters run off of energy. And they get a little bit, you can see the sparks fly between them when they interact. So the music had to reflect that, because otherwise it would just be an empty room with no sound, and it would be sad.
Yeah, and I think when music is well done, it complements it, and you don't really think about it.
Yeah.
When you're spending a lot of time thinking about the music, it might be because you missed the mark, but I don't think that's the case in here. I think it complemented the story very nicely. So we referenced the fact that you were at Comic-Con, showed that picture, and you got some great feedback from people involved with the animated series, including Rogue herself. I saw that on the Instagram. So talk just a little bit, make sure we know where everybody can find it, and what's next.
Oh, wait, who is starting with me?
Well, Caitlin, you do the housekeeping, the plug.
I'll housekeep. I'm good at housekeeping. You can find the film on YouTube right now. The link is in my bio at Cornellable, which anyone who watches Marvel Movie Talk knows that already. But you can also find it at Uncanny Film. And the Instagram has all of the kind of behind the scenes stuff I'm posting constantly. So if anyone else is curious about making a movie, or what it would take to make a movie like this, and please steal all of my mistakes and learn from my mistakes and steal all my good ideas. That's fine. There's room for everybody. And, we made this for fans. The end of the credits, as the set was inclusive, we had representations across diversity. We had LGBTQ plus representation, and our DP was trans. So we were completely inclusive set. That was really important to me. And there is a quote from Rogue that I'd like to end with, that, the difference between the X-Men and the Avengers is the Avengers are trying to keep the world as it is, and the X-Men are trying to make the world into what would be better for everybody. And that's the difference, and that's what they fight for. So in this particular time, choose kindness, choose love, choose understanding. Which is what Gambit did, is he chose to kind of be in that space with her and go into that darkness with her, and pull her out of it, which, for me, yes, it's Rogue's story, but it wouldn't have happened without Gambit. And so I want to thank my cast. I want to thank my crew who worked really hard. I want to thank, my editor, Ajayla, my DP, all the musicians, Raul Vega, who did the internal dialogue sequencing at the beginning of the film, and everyone else I'm forgetting. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And you can find Uncanny on YouTube, and you can find it on the internet. And if you have any questions, just pop me a DM and I'll try my best. I'll do my best to respond. Because honestly, if you have an idea, go make it. I encourage people to just go make stuff.
Right, exactly. And it's easier than ever, in the sense of, you don't have to, rent thousands of dollars of equipment in the way. I'm not even talking so much about your film, but if somebody wants to make something, depending on what the project is, you probably have the means in your home to do it. And that's how you learn, is from just giving it a try. And sometimes you learn from giving it a try and being like, ooh, that did not work out the way I wanted to.
Yeah.
But then you
And
learn what to do next time.
No, and so far we got to talk to Eric and Julia and Larry Houston, who is the director of the X-Men animated series. I'll let Alexa and Charlie talk about Lenore, but uh, Larry and Eric and Julia are some of the kindest, most inclusive people. And so what I learned from this experience is they just like it when things are made, and they like
Sure.
fans engaging in work that they love. I think Charlie said it during Comic-Con, and he's just like, they just love what they made 30 years ago, and they just love this this group of fans. They love what they did, and they just want to keep celebrating it. And so, if there's something that you want to celebrate, that you see like a emptiness, like go fill it. It's up. It's be careful, because the IP we don't own, but it's there's nothing stopping you. And I was like, huh?
Don't let fear stop you, because that's
don't let fear stop you. Let a cease and desist stop you.
Yeah, but when you get to that point, that means you've already done a good job. And Craig says, "Congrats, well said. Wish you the best of future projects." And Daniel Drew was talking about the recent Rogue and Gambit miniseries. They do go through a lot of the relationship passed through a funky resort that got into the memories. And I do agree. This is what I wanted to bring up. The Mr. and Mrs. X run was actually a lot of fun, especially when they were able to wrap Deadpool in there. So I wanted to let Lex and Charlie kind of wind down with some final thoughts, and then to make sure everybody knows where to keep tabs on you. But just talk about that experience of being at Comic-Con, interacting with some of these creators, and since you finished it. I'll ask you first, Alexa.
Yeah. So that going to LA Comic-Con was amazing, especially because it was super surreal to meet all of the creators, Julia and Eric, and then Larry, all of them being so supportive of us, and just the fact that they all shared it. It just means the world to all of us. The fact that the creators of the show, give their little stamp of approval and say, "You guys should watch this. This is great." I mean, I woke up with the biggest smile on my face, and I know he did too. So that was just amazing of them to do that. They didn't need to, but they did. So thank you. And yeah, like just listening to them, just hearing them talk about the series and how much they love it. I think one of the creators actually said something that stuck with me. They were talking about how they wanted to bring Magneto in as more of a villain. But then they also said, the reason why we didn't do that initially was because Magneto is not the main villain of the story.
Right.
It's people. It's just humankind. Yeah. It's bigotry. That is the main story of X-Men, and something that we still deal with today. And that's why I think X-Men is such an important and awesome story to tell, because if you really think about it, it is exactly what we're going through today, and the way that they fight against it without using brute force, just protecting themselves and trying to reason with the unreasonable. That is a fight that we are going to continue to fight. But the X-Men are the perfect people to look to get us through that journey. So that's why I love the X-Men as much as I do. And I appreciated that they said that at the panel. And then, I just want to wrap up real quick talking about meeting Lenore.
Please talk about that.
The first time I met her was at San Diego Comic-Con, and I think she remembers me because I almost passed out. It was an interesting experience. He was there too.
Alexa's like so cool and calm at like most moments. She's got this like cool confidence that's like really hard to master. And like to see the picture of her with Lenore where she's just like, It's like the most like uncool. Like now she's cool, but like from SDCC last year. Oh my god!
The first time I was such a goober, and I couldn't even get words out properly, and she looked at me with like concern, like, "Are you okay?" And I wasn't okay, but it's okay.
So funny.
It's fine because I met her again here, and I was cool, calm, and collected, and told her how much she meant to me and her performance of Rogue and how amazing it was. But yeah, she even
mentioned an equal, because you had also attacked this role and came at it really smart from a sense of understanding. So it wasn't just like, I'm a fan and I'm paying for an autograph. It's I made something inspired, and you helped inspire that. So
she inspired my performance so much. I mean, I know I could not do the voice as well as Lenore ever could. I don't have the scratchiness involved, but I took as much as I could and made it my own. And the fact that she shared it and liked it just, again, means the world to me. But yeah, so meeting her again and was great. I didn't pass out this time. She did talk about in the panel how a lot of people have almost passed out while meeting her. So I felt better about myself in that moment. But yeah, so doing this whole project was amazing. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for being crazy.
You're welcome. Anytime.
That script in my lap and saying, "Let's just do this thing," and because fear kind of gets in my way at times, and I did definitely have had many a conversation with Charlie, like, "Oh man, there are haters all over the internet. What are they gonna say? What are they gonna do? Blah blah blah. What if they hate us?" And he's always just like, "You know what? They can do their own thing. It's fine."
That's what I said. Make your own.
So you can find me personally at Alexa Cappy, Cappy, down below. Come and follow me, follow Charlie, follow Caitlin. We're gonna probably continue to be talking about this project for a little bit, and hopefully watch it.
In 2023, Alexa and I, for real, are going to bring back our show where we're watching movies for the first time.
Yes,
please do.
We have a bucket list movie type of thing where we haven't seen like some, because we consider ourselves cinephiles.
Yeah, but I mean, it was like one of the first ones we did was Taxi Driver, and that's a movie where a lot of people are like, "How did you not see it?" I'm like, "I don't know, I just didn't." But this time of year, it's always good to point out that Alexa's favorite movie that we watched was White Christmas. You were never happier than when you watched White Christmas.
Love that movie.
Story. What is this plot? There was no plot in White Christmas. It's
but a lot of songs, though. A lot of songs. And Charlie, I wanted to give you a moment for a final thought and to make sure that people know where to keep in touch with you.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I mean, look, Comic-Con is incredible. Talking with these creators was just a delight. You don't think about the people behind the cartoons. I don't think not nearly as much as you think about nowadays the people behind film and television. That's changing. Comic-Con definitely put a lot of help behind that, but behind getting these people the credit that they're due. These things they shaped people's lives, and there are a lot of people who really appreciate that. So being able to go spend time and talk with those people who did create this in a character and with another character standing beside me, and to see their kind of delight with it, to piggyback on one of the points that she made is these people created this story for people who felt othered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's something I think everyone can kind of, at some point in life, experiences that. At least everyone that I know. And with all of these different characters within the X-Men and this universe that they created, it allowed you to find somebody else who was othered, who was like you, or who had qualities that you wanted to embody. And, we got a chance to do that. We got to go embody those characteristics of, the cool guy. And these human beings wouldn't exist without these creators giving it and fighting the fights that they did fight. So it was just really cool to hear them talk about that, to be a part of that, and hopefully to be a part of more of these things, to create some more stories within this universe that Caitlin's creating outside of the main bounds of the world, with just the love that we have for these characters and for the stories that we can tell with them.
We've got three more on the way.
To anybody out there wondering about should they, maybe they want to make a fan film, if you're looking for inspiration, my final show and tell is my favorite miniseries, the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. It's something that I talked to Chris Claremont like 10 years ago, and we were just like, this would be the perfect, at that point the Netflix was the outlet for Marvel series. It was like, I don't know why that story hasn't been told, and that Kitty has not been well represented in the terms of the amount of screen time she's gotten.
Are you adding a fourth to our list, Christian? Is this like
yes,
a Santa's
that's exactly
wish list
what
of
I'm doing.
content?
Unfortunately, Bob Hoskins has passed on, so you'll have to find a different.
We'll find
Wolverine.
A new one.
You'll find somebody. But anyway, I'm glad that we had the opportunity to talk about all this fun X-Men talk, and I'm so glad that you all set out to do this project, and it actually happened. I think we all have known people in our lives who have great intentions and they really want to do something, but for so many reasons it doesn't happen. And I'm so glad that people can find it. And hello, Ghost 8386.
Hi, Ghost.
When somebody says hi, I got to make sure that they know. And Daniel Drew's right. X-Men Evolution was a pretty cool show.
Daniel Drew is like mostly right, like all the time. Like every single time, is like, yeah, it's solid.
Yeah. Daniel says something. Yeah, Daniel will answer questions. I'm like, I can't remember what that was. He knows. He's the source on everything. In any case, well, thank you all so much, Alexa, Charlie, and of course Kate. And we'll find excuses to have you all back in 2023, and we'll have a lot to cover Marvel-wise then. We should have one or two more shows before the end of the year, so keep an eye out for that. But that is all the time we have for now. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. Subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, BLADTCAST. You'll get this show and all of our shows, and Alexa and my show as soon as it returns. You'll find everything. But that's all the time we have for now. As the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!